Here, take my hand. Up you come. Ah, quite the view from up here, isn't it? Must be the tallest structure in town. Not scared of heights, are you? How are you getting on, Jasper? Good man, Jasper. We'll have to be careful. I don't think the roof was designed to have the three of us standing on it. You dear. Ah!
Hello and welcome to another episode of the LARP News. Today I'm joined by Scarlett, who's going to talk me through the nation of Highguard, which I have to confess, Scarlett, is not really a nation I know a great deal about. It's one of those kind of nations I've not really had too many interactions with as Talis on the field. So I was just wondering, to sort of kick us off, if you kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and who you play and what Highguard means to you.
It means a lot to me. So, hi, I'm Scarlett, otherwise known as Golden Mochi online. My pronouns are she and her, and I play Brother Luke, previously of the Shattered Tower. As of next event, whenever that might be, I'm starting my own new group, which I'm very excited by, called the Navigators of Virtue, and his pronouns are he, him. And I just love being in Highguard so much. Funnily enough, it wasn't actually my first choice when I first joined Empire. I was going to go to the League, but then I had friends in the Shattered Tower in Highguard. So I was like, okay, let's join my mate, because I have no idea what I'm doing with this whole LARP malarkey. And I have not left since.
So your friends were already in Highguard before you started, and then you...
Yes, so I started at Event 2 Year 1. So the group was already established,
Sure.
And one of my mates was like, hey, I'm trying out this new LARP called Empire, and I'd never LARPed before, ever. I was full-on baby LARPer and was like, okay, let's try this and see how it goes. And yeah, like I make costumes as a living, so for me, when I saw the briefs, I was like, "Ooh, the League! That's very much up my street with all doublets and things." And Highguard, I kind of joined and thought, "Oh, I'll join it, and then once I get my head around the game of Empire, I'll then go and make a League character."
Sure.
But then I enjoyed being part of Highguard so much. Like I say, I have not left. And I think there's just so much about it that's just so wonderful, like the people, the brief, just it's so deep and there's so much to it.
Yeah. If you had to describe Highguard to somebody who maybe wasn't from the nation or didn't even play Empire, how would you describe that to them? Like the general kind of theme and brief and so on?
I would say Gondor from Lord of the Rings, like hardcore Gondor, with a bit of the Byzantine Empire thrown in. And we very the very first thing that you have on the Highguard wiki when you click on it is the Empire is our destiny. That's it. And I think that sums everything up about Highguard. Is we, like, at our core, we created the Empire, and we are sort of the protectors and custodians of the Empire, whereas all the other nations obviously help the Empire and fight for the Empire and all this sort of thing. I kind of see it as Highguard are the oldest siblings of the rest of the nations, in which we're sort of like, yes, you do what you need to do and we'll step in when things get a bit awry and things need to be sorted out, and the grown-ups need to come in and sweep up the mess that's left behind.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware a little bit of the history just because I've been kind of delving into sort of history of all the different nations a little bit to sort of get a grasp of a different sort of podcast episode I'm working on. But and Highguard really are like the founders of the Empire from what I can kind of piece together. So it's quite interesting now, obviously, that the story is far moved on from that point, and obviously all the different nations that come in, and of course the current state of play we find ourselves in the Empire. How do you feel sort of Highguard sitting in the sort of the current sort of world events of Empire?
So I think we have like sort of dual role. So very much how I see it at the moment in terms of the political scene and all that kind of aspect is it's very much um we kind of let the other nations almost take a step forward and kind of leave them to sort of we're there almost as observers to make sure that people are following virtue, because ultimately that is at our core, is we want to make sure that everyone is following virtue. It can be in any way they want, if Dawn find glory to be virtuous, to help them achieve virtue rather, then we'll let them do that kind of thing. And it's just very much making sure that people are following the religion in their own particular way. So we kind of only step in when we need to, but at the same time, as these sort of protectors of the empire, we're also very willing to, I guess, almost be martyrs in that respect of giving up great things, help the empire as a whole.
Yeah.
So recently, obviously, we've had the whole Grey Pilgrim thing.
That was what I was going to say. Obviously, as an
yeah.
Avar, I'm very conscious of that, the whole Grey Pilgrim thing. Do you mind describing that a little bit to everyone?
Yeah, so basically that was actually a big debate in Highguard, and it was the decision on whether or not, basically someone had put forward a statement of principle in the Synod that said that the Valorn is the greatest threat to the Empire. And as a nation that protects the Empire, we sort of thought, well, this is something that's so big, we need to decide how to address this. If the Valorn is the greatest threat to the Empire, we can't just sit by and not do anything about it. And basically, it in the terms of plot, it kicked off an opportunity where Highguard could essentially create a new archetype, which is the Grey Pilgrims, who would spend the entirety of their lives walking the trods to help redefine the trods as they are in how Navarre work and so on. And essentially that would mean, I believe it was a third, might have been even more than that, of the highborn population would leave Highguard and spend the entirety of their lives walking the trods.
Yeah, it was a significant...
It was a huge... And it basically meant that... so one of the big debates was the fact that Highguard had been working to build a fourth army. Yeah. Like, that was a big thing. And, yeah, the big debate was, if we lose 1/3, or however many it was, of our population, we will never be able to have a fourth army, because there literally is not a population there to run it. And, there are all these other aspects of, like, we're going to lose this, we're going to lose that. And again, 1/3 of a population, that's so huge, many people. Yeah. And so it was this massive big debate in Highguard about, should we do it? And ultimately it did get decided that we were going to take this on, and we were going to have the Grey Pilgrims, which is now a new archetype, which is quite cool. So you can literally come into play as a Grey Pilgrim, which I think is really cool. And obviously that followed up the following season, where another opportunity was made, where it said all the other nations put forward a certain amount of people to kind of join the Grey Pilgrims or help the Grey Pilgrims on their journey. It would assist Highguard in doing that, and it would be an even better chance to help try and stop the Valorn. And it was just a wonderful sign of, Highguard, like I say, being a martyr and giving up something for the belief in what the Empire is, and then the other nations seeing that and going, yeah, we're going to help with that. Yeah. I think that's the thing. It's like, it was this sort of wonderful coming together of all the nations.
Yeah, I mean, speaking from my perspective, as I say, I'm kind of very aware of kind of the things that Highguard have done, and like the Grey Pilgrims and so on. I just personally not had too many role-playing opportunities with people from Highguard, but I'm especially being a Navarre, and especially obviously with all of the recent sort of semi-successes we've had against the Valorn, which are directly resultant really of the opportunities like the Grey Pilgrims that have been afforded us. It's had some significant game impact, and is very meaningful. And it's, I think it's exciting that like dynamics like that can come into play from a player's idea to bring this up at the Senate, and then how that can then feed into wider decisions, and it feeds out to the nation. I assume there was obviously quite a bit of debate within the nation itself about how that would come about.
So much debate. Because Highguard is also primarily a military nation. Like, part of the brief is that most highborn citizens have done military service at some point in their lives. And obviously you'll see us in the battlefield and so on. So you had a very big contingent of, the sort of more martial and military side of things kind of being like, oh, but, we need our fourth army, we need it to fight the Druge and kick them out and so on. And obviously, considering when Empire started, we didn't have the territory of Rykos, so obviously,
Sure.
Highguard have their own issues with the Druge and so on. And then you had the sort of more priestly people kind of saying, well, I completely understand that. Yes, we do need to fight the Druge, but we have agreed as a nation through, the voting of this principle that the Valorn is a bigger issue. And therefore, we need to address this big issue. And I think that's what's so great about Highguard is it's about big decisions. It's about not necessarily moral decisions, but it's about virtuous decisions. What is the virtuous choice to make, and subsequently those big decisions coming out from it.
Sometimes a theme that, and again, forgive all my ignorance here because I'm quite external to the nation, but sometimes some of the influences I hear kind of come from that whole 40k style inquisitorial kind of thing, which I think is often sort of overplayed. But there is a touch of the, if you like, the arbiters of sort of virtue, as you say, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
How does that operate in play in your experience? Like, how do you see sort of members of the nation sort of approach that aspect of the brief?
Well, so there is actually an archetype which is the Inquisitor, and their job is literally to defend the way against anyone who's threatening it, and that can be people, it can be mortals, it can be Eternals. I'm a Magister, which is a highborn mage, so I very much take the role of sort of dealing with Eternals that I think are going to disrupt virtue and the way and all that kind of thing. And so it's very much about in the brief they specifically say that Highguard are not sort of zealots. But there is a certain kind of assurance in our belief of we need to protect the way above all else. Like, the way and the Empire are intrinsically linked.
Yeah, there's kind of like there's almost, as I said, like an arbitorial sort of aspect to it. Like, maybe not zealous in the sort of the way that you'd think of somebody being absolutely fanatical. But
I mean, you can't get fanatics in Highguard.
Of course, yes, no. but maybe like more commonly zealous in terms of the idea of upholding the virtues of the virtue as it is.
Yeah. I mean, again, what I like about Highguard is that everyone has different opinions on how how virtue can be achieved, or whether or not something is virtuous. There was a big debate in what happened recently with a couple of Highborn chapter at the last event caused this big drama where they cursed a League city for reasons, from what my character would say is bad reasons. But anyway, and then that actually got debated in the Highguard National Assembly, which is where all the priests of the nation get together and discuss whether an action is virtuous or not. And although what the chapter did was bad, in terms of how it got debated in the National Assembly, the Highborn ultimately decided that their actions were done for a virtuous reason, and therefore their actions were okay, and they could not condemn it as a bad action in that sense. That is up for debate because
Sure.
personally, my character is not okay with that decision. but the Highborn National Assembly did come to that conclusion. So again, it's that sort of thing of there's lots of sitting down and listening, considering actions. I mean, I've been to a couple of Highborn Inquisitions, and they are intense. That they're amazing roleplay opportunities, but they are intense. So there was one where one of my chapter, Hazel, played by my friend Beth, she ran off to Navarre for, I believe, a season or something. And when she came back to the chapter, she was put under Inquisition because it was like, well, you ran away from the chapter. That shows a lack of loyalty. That shows a lack of courage because you didn't stay and stand up for the reason you ran away. Blah blah blah. And basically, we had this evening Inquisition where we had a table and we had the Cardinal of Loyalty, the Inquisitor of Pride, and then one of the Highborn priests of Loyalty, sort of running the Inquisition, facing off against Hazel, who was just sat on this little chair with a scribe next to her. Right. And all the Highborn had their hoods up, so you knew it was serious business. And there was literally an audience there watching this Inquisition because it was so kind of intense and dark. And yeah, it's more about asking questions and finding the reason why someone did something. Because part of the Highguard brief is we believe that only actions can be either virtuous or unvirtuous. So it does. If you sort of are casually having a conversation with someone and you suggest, oh, we should do this, and it's an unvirtuous thing, we don't really care because you're discussing it. It's okay to chat about things and discuss stuff. It's only when you then do something and do an action that it can then be viewed as either virtuous or unvirtuous. And the idea is that you should try and do everything with a sense of virtue. That should be your goal. See, that creates some debate in the field with other nations, but that's where the fun comes from.
So in terms of how those differences between other nations, but also differences between factions of the nation almost, how are those two different types of interaction generally conducted, or are they very much handled in the same way?
So it's a little bit different. So our groups in Highguard are referred to are called chapters, so like a monastic chapter or something. And when people join a chapter, you don't join it out of family or friendship. You join it out of belief in what the chapter stands for. So each chapter in Highguard has a very specific set of beliefs. So one might be, we want to, I don't know, root out all the Eternals and get rid of them. Another one might be, we want to destroy the Druge utterly and completely. And although there might be a crossover between them, obviously sometimes doing things against the Druge might mean you have to do something with the Eternals, which then causes friction between the two chapters. But again, what's sort of wonderful about the Highguard nation as a whole is, although we all disagree because we all have different focuses, whenever something comes and threatens a chapter from an outside perspective, Highguard basically are like, oh, no. Like, only we're allowed to bully our siblings. Like, you're not allowed to do it. And they all band together. And I think that's what's really lovely about Highguard, is there's very much this unity between the chapters when we need to. And there's this sort of understanding of, yes, I disagree with you, but I can understand why you believe this thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So part of the reason I've made my own new chapter for whenever the next event may be, is because in character, Luke, my character, decided that the Shatter Tower didn't match with the Shatter Towers anymore.
Okay.
And so he decided to go on pilgrimage, and he went around and asked all the other chapters in Highguard, what do you stand for? What are your beliefs? What are your goals, etc.? And ultimately he was like, there's none that actually fit with where I want to go or what I believe in. So it's like, well, hang on, I'll just make my own chapter, which,
Okay.
I mean, what's been lovely is a couple of people have come and joined me, and some people who I've never met before. I just met them at a player event, and I did a speech where I was like, "Oh, this is what my chapter stands for," and then they came up to me and like, "Hey, we're looking for a new chapter to join, and we like what you're about. Can we join your chapter, please?"
That's awesome.
So that was so cool. I was like, "Oh my god, that's amazing." So yeah, outside of Highguard, it's very much kind of like I say, it's almost like a sort of big sibling kind of attitude, I would say, in a kind of, you sort of let people get on with things and they have their own beliefs and stuff, but you kind of sort of side eye it and go, are we stepping over the line here? Are we going into like dodgy, unvirtuous territory? So there's currently a whole big debate with the Marchers and Highguard, in that Highguard, part of the thing that the Grey Pilgrims do as well is, while they go and walk the trods, is try and root out heresy and all this sort of thing. And so they've been showing up at the marches being like, we're not sure if the whole dead people turning into apple tree thing is entirely fitting with the doctrines of faith. Let's deal with this situation. So again, that creates some wonderful opportunities of role play and conflict, and the marchers try to convince us that it's not. Again, we had another one where Dawn announced, well, there was this whole big debate about, does glory and love in Dawn kind of encourage virtue, or is it something separate, and all this sort of thing. So yeah, it's I mean, it sounds like I'm talking a lot about the religion, and you don't actually have to know a lot about the religion for the Highguard brief. I mean, obviously, if you know the 7 virtues,
Yes.
you're pretty much solid. But a large part of being highborn is to have a certainty about what you believe in terms of the religion. So, and you can question things, you can discuss things, and that's totally cool and okay. But whatever it is you believe, it's good to be sort of quite firm in that belief.
Yeah, I think the way in itself is quite intelligently designed as a game mechanic, if you like, where each of the virtues is debatable enough that you can have a very in-depth conversation about, say, wisdom or pride, and both be right and yet wrong in each other's opinion at the same time.
Exactly.
Or vice versa, right? And it leads to some very interesting kind of dynamics. And I think, like, as a backdrop for the nation, the way it kind of sits there, I think, and it does sort of feel like a kind of a, from the outside, like a religious-focused nation, but I'm sure there are many, many other draws and pulls within the nation as well, especially as sort of the original founders of the empire and what that represents, and the whole kind of, as you say, like protectoring kind of aspect that kind of flows through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of our archetypes are called guardians. We don't actually have a lot of them in the nation at the moment. But if people want to become a guardian in Highguard, that would be cool. But yeah, they're guardians, and their job is literally as protectors. They are guardians. And again, I think that just says so much about Highguard in just the use of the name.
There's also Highguard for me, and again, I can only speak sort of semi-removed, but there's this wonderful aesthetic to the nation and this kind of presence to the nation. For example, you guys have I forget, you'll have to correct me on the right term for it, but there's like a walk that you do, a torchlit walk.
Yeah, Day of the Dead.
It's really dramatic. It's really like visually dramatic, and probably as one of the kind of festivals, if you like, that the different nations have one of the most kind of intriguing and arresting to just sit and watch. If you just happen to be sitting on a bench or something, and you look out and you can see 100 more people walking with torches and all in procession, it really is quite a dramatic thing. Do you mind describing that festival a little bit to everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what it is it's Day of the Dead, and so what it is it's a procession where we walk in remembrance of the fallen, basically, and that isn't just the fallen of Highguard on our chapters. It's also of all citizens.
Yeah, I mean,
So I've
you're
actually,
welcome to join it, aren't you? Like, I mean,
yeah,
I've been
completely.
asked to, if I would like to walk with the procession for a while. And I have done for a little bit, and it's interesting to sort of, and especially when you've lost somebody from in play, it's quite an interesting thing to sort of join as part of, and it has a lot of character to it for sure.
Yeah. So what's so lovely about it? So it happens at dusk. So it starts just as the light is going down. Obviously, everyone's lighting all their torches, and then we will walk in silence, save for the ringing of bells, maybe a banging of a drum, and we will walk with these torches through every camp in Anvil, and everyone's got their hoods up, so you know it's serious business. And there's incense, and I've actually spoken to a couple of new players who have done Day of the Dead as their first event, and each time they say that was quite literally a religious experience. The atmosphere and the emotion was so compelling. And what I love about it is you walk in silence through all these camps, and at the same time, the League are having their Day of the Reaper festival.
Yes,
so it's
course,
all sort of jolly and partying, but in their tents. And then suddenly, as soon as we hit League, like when we're walking through the League camp, everything stops. Like it goes silent, and you get just this massive feeling of reverence and just atmosphere. You walk by and you see people sort of taking their hats off and kind of bowing. I've heard parents saying to their children, "Oh, this is Day of the Dead. They're in remembrance." We've walked through the Wintermark camp where there have been Wintermarkers calling out the names of their dead as we walk by. It gives me sort of chills, It's so atmospheric, and I would, anyone who wishes to do to experience like real kind of, I don't know, real sense of immersion, I would recommend taking a look at Day of the Dead, which will be happening at the next event, which is exciting.
Yeah, it really is a very dramatic thing, and I think it's actually perfectly suited to the nation. I mean, it could easily have been something like a festival that existed in another nation, but tied in with the aesthetic of Highguard, I think it really blends perfectly between the two. And talking more broadly about the aesthetic of the nation, how would you roughly describe that?
I would say so the brief specifically says, Gondor from Lord of the Rings, but I would also say it's got some Knights Templar thrown in, with the surcoats and so on, and a little bit of Byzantium. But then again, there's also, like you said earlier, that sort of 40k element. It's definitely, I would say, the most kind of fantasy based of nations, in the sense that you can't pinpoint a specific like historical period it's meant to be. I would also say maybe a bit of King's Landing from Game of Thrones in there as well. So it's very much about this kind of everything's got like a religious quality to it. So there's bells everywhere, because bells are part of our hearth magic. So the idea is that when you ring a bell, or you hear like wind chimes ring, you can hear the voices of the dead. And it's not so much as like they're whispering to you, it's more like you kind of sort of feel their presence, and you sort of feel inspired by like their words, or some comfort they might have given. But also in terms of hearth magic, you can ring them at wraith, and the wraiths are like, no.
That's really cool.
It's really cool. And there was a very funny mini story where we were on a skirmish once, and there were some wraiths, and we started ringing our bells, and the wraiths were like, and then there were a bunch of Wintermarkers there going, they're scared of bells, and they started ringing their bells, and the wraiths were like, nah, it doesn't work with you, mate. went after the Wintermarkers. And again, like we've got things like the wash bowls, because obviously cleanliness is a big deal in Highguard.
Yeah, do you mind describing? Because the hand washing is it's one of those kind of stereotypes that I think most nations know about with regards to Highguard. Do you mind describing like where that fits into the brief and how that kind of comes about?
Yeah, so I can't go too much in depth because part of it is has been discovered through historical research as to why we started doing that. But it is on the wiki if people look hard enough. The sort of major point is we believe in cleanliness as a kind of purity. You know, when you go into a ritual, you cleanse the circle. I suppose it almost has like a holy water kind of quality to it. You wash your hands as a sort of sign of respect, as a sign of dignity, to say that, you know, I am giving all of myself over to it, and therefore I'm washing myself clean to deal with this situation. So I am sort of, you know, I'm pure. I've got rid of the sort of bad impurities that have sort of like, and it's quite fun when you go to other nations who might not have wash bowls, because you can always show up and be like, you know, when you turn up at a camp and be like, excuse me, has anyone got a wash bowl? And you kind of get looked at a bit weird. But that you can also do like gestures, so you can sort of gesture that you're like washing yourself, and it's kind of a way of saying like, I'm done with this situation, I'm done with this conversation, I'm done with you because I'm washing myself of you.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there's really nice little details that you can use in that. Yeah. And again, there was, I believe it was during the Rykos campaign, we had a Highborn army fighting alongside a Navarre army. And although both got injured kind of equally badly, I believe the Navarre ended up having more casualties just because Highguard's level of cleanliness was sort of so extreme. They actually, you know, it was sort of like...
Interesting, yeah.
We were doing pandemic levels of cleanliness. There wasn't a pandemic, you know? It was that kind of thing. And yeah, so it's a wonderful kind of opportunity to just have really nice little moments of role play. And there's really sweet moments where, yeah, you do turn up at another nation's camp and they're like, oh, they're Highborn, and quickly run over with a bowl of water. And it's just those sort of nice little moments that kind of really make it feel alive and like you're part of, you know, a real nation.
Yeah. I think sometimes as well there's this because there is the brief as described can sound quite austere, but there's actually quite a degree of playfulness and levity from what I've picked up from the nation as well, that like you can also do it not maybe tongue in cheek, but you can do it with a little bit of kind of fun as well. It doesn't have to be like strictly po-faced all the time.
No, not at all. I think that's actually another thing that I like about Highguard is people have this sort of assumption that we're serious business all the time, and no, that is not the case at all. You know, we very much are happy to have fun, and you know, so again, another small part of the brief is we don't like games of chance because we're very into competition. And games of chance, essentially there's no skill in it because it's just like, well, it's whether you have dumb luck or whatever. Whereas games of skill, you know, means you actually need to put some thought into it. So it's always quite fun going over to the marchers when they're doing their summer fair, and you know they've got the tombola or whatever, and we sort of go, this is a game of chance I do not approve. And really, we don't care, but it's just quite fun to go over and sort of be like, oh, I don't like this.
But then maybe you'll do something like apple bobbing, which is some sort of skill associated with it. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Throwing things at the coconut shy or
whatever. Yeah, or whatever, all sorts of stuff like that, you know.
I mean, another fun thing, and this is developed purely in play, and I really like it, is the idea of Highguard pillow book. So it kind of came about the concept that, you know, when you're a teenager, you're very much like, oh, I'm going to rebel and, I don't know, fancy this person that my parents disapprove of, or, you know, it's that kind of like teenage rebellion idea. So the sort of concept is that when you're a young highborn, you might have like an interest in, when your parents might disapprove of you being with a lineage, you might be like, well, I'm going to date a lineage boy or whatever. Sure. And so there's this whole idea of Highguard pillow books, which is like sold under the table, slightly black market, raunchy stories that are like, slightly unvirtuous, maybe
Pop
just
over
a bit
to the
naughty.
Anvil Library and find something and.
Yeah, exactly. It's very much like done under the table, kind of you leave with it in a brown paper bag kind of thing. So, and again, that's just developed in play as a fun little thing of like,
I really like little quirks like that, like things that have come out through, that have evolved over time as like reactions to different briefs and kind of little playful pokes and nods and things. I quite like stuff like that that's obviously popped up and become a thing, So I find
it makes the world feel
exactly.
It makes the world feel more real.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I'm just thinking. The other thing is like a lot of. So one thing I've come across a lot is people who are new to Empire or new to Anvil or whatever. They hear that we chop horns off lineage and all sorts of things like that, and so if they're playing a lineage character, they might go whole events where they never show up at the Highguard camp because there's this sort of belief that if they do, we're literally going to tackle them to the floor and cut their horns off, and then they'll be like, oh, but I wanted to play a changeling, It's like, we do not do that. That is absolutely nothing we do. But if we get the sense that someone's up for a laugh, we might sort of like play into it a bit.
Yeah.
But more as a joke, as a kind of, again, the amount of times people have come up and been like, oh, like, you're going to come and chop my horns off. And we're like, if you like, if you want us to, we can. But, again, it's that sort of like gentle playfulness. And I think people always get slightly surprised when they're not expecting it.
Yeah. It's it's probably worth going over actually the relationship between the lineaged and Highguard in the brief. How does that interplay function both in the brief and in play in your experience? Obviously, you've described a little bit of it in play, but
so basically, our Highguard's belief is that if you are lineaged, the reason you have become lineaged is either you or someone in your ancestry has had their soul come tainted essentially by magic from the realms. So that's why you become a Mero, or that's why you become a Briar because of spring magic or whatever. And obviously, as a nation that's very focused on purification and cleanliness, this is like a big bad because of the one thing you want to keep pure and unaffected is the soul, because the soul is what goes through the labyrinth and will eventually ascend a paragon or exemplar or whatever. And so we don't, there might be some chapters that hate lineage for this because it's like, oh, impro, blah blah blah, but generally the sort of feeling is more a sense of this is an affliction that someone has been afflicted with and therefore needs to be helped. And I mean, there definitely is a sort of hierarchy in how people treat lineaged and non-lineage. Like, that is built into the brief.
Yeah, and I think that sort of that element of offense is part of it, right? Like it is. Yeah. It's supposed to be a needle in the game, right? That is there.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, when I interact, I will, as sort of my way of doing it, I would refer to humans and lineage, and then I've noticed recently, a lot, especially from other nations, people will correct me and be like, "You mean humans?" And I'll be like, "Yes, humans and lineage." So it's almost this concept that lineage are separate from humans. And it's that sort of thing where it just makes you kind of wince a little bit inside when but that sort of discomfort is literally built into the brief. It's meant to be there. And again, it's just very interesting how that comes out in play, because we do have a lot of lineage characters in Highguard, and I think part of that is people want to play that game. People want to have that sort of sense of, I'm going to kind of prove myself, and kind of that slight ostracization from the nation, but not. But then you get other people who are like, no, I'm going to go full on sort of indoctrinated into the Highguard belief. So part of the reason, like, the whole idea of cutting off horns and stuff is a thing, is it is seen as a lineage person rejecting their lineage and sort of saying, I'm not going to, although I may be a Briar, I'm going to do my utmost to fight against the sort of Briar element of my behavior. And it's very much that kind of idea. It's all about kind of, are you doing this because you believe this is the most virtuous thing to do, or are you doing it because what your lineage can do is make you make these decisions, Yeah. So again, it ties back into that whole idea of, are you doing it for virtuous reasons or not?
It's a powerful part of the game to play around, and in terms of character concepts and role-playing opportunities, and obviously it has to be dealt with a certain degree of sensitivity.
Yeah.
But it's one of those aspects of play. I mean, again, if you have something like the Imperial Orcs, that experience. And the experience of choosing to be a lineage and what that means and the types of interactions you can have and the opportunities that can arise in terms of role playing, it's an interesting part of the game for sure. I mean, how does Highguard interact with the Imperial Orcs, for example? Is there a different kind of relationship there to sort of how lineage are handled?
Yeah,
or...
so the Orcs are kind of more treated as almost like, I suppose, a separate thing. and it's kind of like, we're glad that they follow the way, we're glad they follow virtue, because ultimately we want everyone to follow the way and everyone to follow virtue. But it's also the sense of, are they, I guess it's almost like described as like, are they almost like sleeper agents? There's this sort of undercurrent of, we will trust you and we will like treat you like allies, and you're part of the Empire. But there's always that sort of slight niggle in the background, kind of going like, but do I fully trust you? And also, again, because Rykos did get taken over by the Druge, you still get a lot of, because that happened within recent memory, so you still get a lot of people who play characters who are genuinely afraid of the Orcs, because it's like, yeah, you might be an Imperial Orc, I also saw an army of Druge come and slaughter my whole chapter and, inflict horrible, horrible things upon my nation. How do I know you're not one day going to turn around and do that as well? So it's very much seen as a separate thing. Whereas the lineage, it's like, you poor things, you've got this affliction and we're going to help you. With the Orcs, it's like, you're allies and we will work with you, but we're always ever so slightly suspicious.
So in terms of
we're good people, I swear.
No, I think like it's a really interesting part of the brief, and I think like the nation as a whole, it does have this kind of, from the outside, thinking the right words really, but it has this kind of like threat to it, this kind of this edge to it, which is an interesting aspect to play around. But when, as I say, you actually also engage, then of course you're dealing with human beings playing these roles, and there's lots of opportunities for fun and levity, and to explore all sorts of different aspects of play, and obviously it's not all serious all the time, or and it's as I said, like the benefits and especially for me, I found like just the aesthetic and the fact that Highguard as a thing exists in the Empire, even if my interaction with it is fairly limited at this point in time, like the fact that there's the history and everything else that ties in and flows through the nation, and then more broadly into what that means for the Empire. I think there is a presence to the Highguard that is kind of, it teases its way into a lot of different aspects of play, and I felt that as a player, and it's definitely an interesting nation to see, and I'm sure must be a really interesting nation to play. And
I was just going to say that in terms of the whole kind of lineage attitude thing and the orc attitude, there are obviously players who are just like, I don't want to take part in that side of the brief, and so they just don't, and totally cool and fine, and it's no one is going to purposefully go out there and try and upset someone. Like, that genuinely isn't the case.
I think that's a really important thing to highlight as well, that like that is not like the brief is not a license to be an arsehole. And people don't play it that way typically, and treat everyone generously in terms of the intention of play, and obviously being aware of who you're interacting with and who you're role playing with, and
completely. I mean, I would say it's done in like it's not like an overt kind of we're gonna beat you up because your lineage kind of thing. It's much more kind of subtle, and I'd say almost like a little bit insidious. But like, again, it's very much how people want to play it, and if people are not comfortable with it, people will sort of test the waters, and like if people respond to it, then the role play will continue, and if people don't, it's like, cool, okay, this isn't okay with you, won't sort of play this up. I mean, I've had instances where people have come to me because I'm the Archmage of Summer, so I do summer shenanigans. I've had people come up to me and be like, hi, I want to become a changeling. And I'm sort of stood there like, yeah, no, you know, why? And I literally have asked them, you know, why would you want to corrupt your soul that way? and you know, they kind of get surprised that that's my response. So it's that sort of fun. You can sort of play with it in that respect. It's that kind of bringing that other side to the aspect of it. You know, Dawn, they love their changelings. And in Highguard, we're a bit like, yeah, no, nope.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's what's good about it, is you get those little moments that come up, which again, it's not a horrible thing. You know, if someone really, really wants to corrupt their soul, I will do my utmost to convince them otherwise. But ultimately, I'm not going to stop their game if that's what they want to do. You know.
Sure. As I say, it's such an it's not an element of play that I've really had a lot of interaction with, but the fact that it exists and that there are players who explore it, and the opportunities I imagine that must afford, and dealt with sensitively, I think it's definitely an interesting part of play. And it's obviously it is an element and within Empire at the game itself that I think is there for exploring if you want to. And I think it's definitely an intriguing part of the game. And that's sort of more, again, that sort of links into the relationship of orcs, and obviously different nations have even like the idea, and you don't have to take it in terms of interactions with lineaged or orcs or anything like that. It could just be relationships between different nations, and the idea of like some nations might have a slightly kind of derogatory kind of preset kind of level of feeling towards maybe another nation. They have those sort of stereotypes that are kind of often cast on different nations in the real world that then kind of feed in, oh, you know, so-and-so's the people from this nation into this thing, la-di-da-di-da kind of stuff that can kind of seep into things. And it's kind of like those kind of aspects of play are definitely interesting elements that are kind of exist, and I think they're kind of built into a certain degree within the kind of broader context of that the Empire is built up out of different peoples coming together to achieve common goals, hopefully. Not all the time. But like, and I think that's the fact that it largely functions, and that there is this spirit of cooperation, I think also speaks very highly, and that there are things that different people who you would imagine would naturally maybe not have similar goals can be drawn together to achieve something that is important to the Empire as a whole. And for example, I mean, the Grey Pilgrims being a good example of how a nation like Highguard can do something which is very self-sacrificing, that ultimately ends up really assisting another nation, and all of these different aspects of play that can kind of come out through exploring the different national identities. I think that's one of the reasons we've done this series of going around and looking at the different nations, is because they're all so different, and they're all kind of angled. The sort of the pointy bits of their briefs are all pointed in different directions, and sometimes those point at other nations and sort of a natural challenges to those other nations. You know, like why does what does it mean to play an Imperial Orc and not actually enter the Labyrinth, for example? What does it mean to be a Highguard and have this kind of religious undertone and so on? You know, these different aspects of national identity are interesting to explore, and how they kind of bubble to the surface and then express themselves through the players as the nodes that sort of sprinkle out into the world. And just the plethora of aesthetics. I mean, that's one of the things that I really enjoy. Just all kind of like interpersonal things aside, just the visual color that comes from all of these different nations interacting. It's, you know, if we were just one homogenous blob that all had like the same fashion, for example, it would be a shame, right? Because there's something very special about being able to look out and say, oh, look, it is, you know, Day of the Dead, and you can see the procession of Highguard walking. That is a striking thing to look at. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but like the Empire as a whole and the way it's made up as a game and as nations, nation briefs. Do you have any thoughts on how you feel?
I mean, yeah, no, I completely agree. I absolutely love it, and for me, it is that sort of differences between the nations that make it feel real, and then it also makes it feel that much more significant when big events like the Grey Pilgrims happen, where everyone comes together to achieve like an ultimate goal. Like, it's like, yeah, we managed to like put all our differences aside and actually like do this big awesome thing. And I think that's really cool. Like, we you know, in the Brass Coast, black is seen as, you know, color of death and a bad omen, and they don't wear black for that reason. Most of Highguard wear black. So you know, you get a lot of freeborn who come over, and so you can see them kind of almost squirming just by being in our presence because everyone's wearing black.
And then when it's hot weather, they're kind of like, oh, please, we're not you guys.
Yeah, there's a reason I have gone for no black in my new color scheme for my tabs. I was like, I'm done with sweltering in the heat. But again, it's those little moments.
Yeah.
Where again it really feels like a real place where everyone's like, again, like one of Highguard's half magic, and part of our brief is the raising of hoods and cowls and things. And what's so good about that is everyone wears hoods in the Empire, pretty much everyone. Everyone who's got a cloak has got a hood, especially when it's raining. But when you get like a highborn who suddenly puts their hood up, it's almost like the atmosphere in the room changes, like the temperature drops, and you get this sort of feeling of, oh, something serious is happening.
See, I was actually not aware of that as a thing. Is that actually part of the brief, that if you put your hood up as a Highguard, you're saying this is serious? Is that basically the undertone that's kind of taking place there?
Yeah. So basically, when a highborn puts a hood up or covers their face with a veil or something, so it's essentially saying, I am not me, I am representing virtue. I am representing the essence of virtue. And it's sort of almost an opportunity as a highborn to put your personality aside and almost become more severe and take something much more seriously. Also mechanically, it also means that if you're discussing things with magical beings like Eternals and stuff, they can't actually recognize you. They just see a sort of highborn figure, but they don't know who you are, which is a nice little touch. But yeah, so you get these, so you know, I'll be in a conversation with someone and suddenly it goes onto a topic of virtue or something quite serious, and I will just suddenly lift my hood up, and again, you can kind of see the other person kind of going, oh, okay. And it's my sort of, well, it's not just mine, it's Highguard's sign of sort of saying, right, this is me putting aside my own personal opinions, and this is me going to the core of the matter, which ultimately is this virtuous, or what the virtuous subject of this matter is. Yeah.
So in terms of kit, then, like, obviously a hood is and anything that kind of can offer you protection from the rain is big and clever anyway. But in terms of Highguard brief, it's a fairly core thing then.
Yeah, whenever someone, so for example, if someone pops up on the Highguard Facebook page with their new kit, the first thing that's always said is, "Have you got a hood?"
Okay.
So it's either a hood or a veil, or like I say, just something that can cover your face.
Right.
And I mean, you're going to notice this everywhere now. So you
Sure.
see a bunch of Highborn about putting their hoods up, and then suddenly it is like there's this sort of weird eeriness about it.
No, I
And
really dig that. Just you telling me that makes me excited to sort of see that as a
Yeah.
visual cue when I next get into play, because I think that's a really exciting concept. Just those simple little things that exist, and there's other sort of examples of it in different nations. But when you're kind of aware of these things, often they're quite exciting things to sort of pick up on. It's like the equivalent, obviously, that an Urazeni won't obviously physically touch you or something like that.
Yeah.
These little aspects of play are actually quite interesting workarounds and ways of kind of having these kind of subtle subliminal messages that you can kind of put forward. I really like it. I think it's really kind of clever design. In terms of like achieving the Highguard aesthetic, do you have any tips for like new players coming in, like how you can, I guess, A, achieve it on a relative budget, and then B, how you would maybe then look at advancing that sort of base level kit? Do you have any tips you can offer people with regards to that?
I mean, obviously a hood or a veil, given the current conversation.
Sure.
But to be honest, if you're doing a really basic Highguard kit, one of the sort of go-to things is shirt, trousers, and a tabard. What if you don't have a group that you're joining? Like a lot of people who show up in Highguard sort of say, "Hey, can I join a chapter?" And we usually say it's better to join a chapter in play, because it goes back to that whole thing of, finding a chapter that has the belief that your character matches with, and also it gives you the opportunity to go around and meet people, which is a nice thing
it's
to
always
do.
I think wise to actually have an opportunity to speak with the players at an event and have an opportunity to see if just you as on interpersonal relationships, if they're a good fit for where you want to be.
Totally. And so what most people say is start with the basic colors of black and white, and then when you join a chapter, you can then start to incorporate the colors of that particular chapter. But basically, you're going to be safe if you show up in black and white.
Sure.
Black and white surcoat, black trousers, top, hood, and you're good to go. Like, really basic kit.
Okay.
That's all you need at the very basic level. And we're very good at sharing armor and weapons and stuff, so you don't even need to show up necessarily with gear, because we have a lot of spare gear to share out.
What are kind of the natural steps for advancing that look as you kind of go on? Where do you normally look to sort of like if you were making sort of your first upgrades, if as it were, from that initial starting kit, where do you normally look to?
I would always say a cassock. So essentially like a priest robe, because even if you're not playing a priest character, which I'm not playing a priest character, the cassock is sort of like a quintessential Highguard look.
And you can always use it in a kind of layering way as well, I suppose.
Oh, totally. I mean, basically, you can get away with a very basic Highguard kit, because ultimately it's all about sort of very sort of severe lines, a little bit of decoration, but not going kind of overboard. And the big thing about Highguard is we're all about uniformity, and we're big into our branding as well. So, chapter logos everywhere. But the idea is that no matter where you go in Anvil, someone spots you and goes, that person is from Highguard and they're from this chapter.
Right.
That is the idea. So even if it is just an upgraded tabard with a massive logo of your chapter on it, that's good enough. Then you can go into jewelry and things. So circlets in Highguard denote like high status. So if you see people wearing a circlet, they've probably got like an imperial position, or they're an exarch or something, which is the name of the leaders of a chapter. But yeah, it's not the most blingy of nations. But it's all very kind of severe and sort of quite, again, it's got that kind of austere kind of look to it. But it's all like good quality jewelry. Yeah, and it's a chance to sort of like, how do I describe it? It's kind of like like Cersei in
Yes.
Game of Thrones in the later seasons,
Yeah.
when she's wearing like the really dark, severe clothes. Very Highguard look, very Highguard.
So, because obviously you've just recently gone through the process of designing your new chapter, were there considerations that you made when you were thinking about how you wanted to design the aesthetic of that? Were there kind of certain sort of... It's probably also worth saying, Scarlett, that you actually do a fair bit of kit design and construction yourself.
Yes.
In fact, you take a lot of commissions in. So this is a realm that you're very, very, very skilled at. So it's probably worth sort of putting that out to people as well, so they're aware that you're coming from.
Yeah, commission me, please.
Yeah, no, like fabulous work. I mean, some of the things you've shown me are amazing, like mind blowing. But like, when you were designing your own chapter, were there sort of things that you wanted to like look into when you were kind of thinking about the aesthetic and how you wanted to maybe create that?
So my previous chapter was the Shattered Tower, and we went very much for a sort of grim, dark 40k kind of aesthetic.
I think Shattered Tower are particularly known for that kind of look, and they are very recognisable as a result of that. It is a very strong
it really works. Sure. It really works. And so I very much wanted to kind of, because my character had like left because it's like, my beliefs don't match up anymore. I want to kind of do something different. I very much wanted to be distinctly different. So while the Shattered Tower had their grim dark look, I very much wanted to go with a more, I guess, kind of orthodox religious look. Okay. So I looked at sort of Catholicism, sort of like priest robes and Catholicism, leaning very hard into the Byzantine kind of Holy Roman Empire kind of aspect. Again, sort of like Russian Orthodoxy.
Yeah, because the jewelry in that kind of is one of the things that often leaps out at me from that sort of, the kind of the large, sort of slightly dulled gemstones, things like garnet and stuff like that are often very striking.
And yeah, I just very so my color scheme for the new chapter is white and gold, like I say, to very much lean into that sort of holy Roman kind of aspect of it. Because I wanted to really focus on that kind of, we represent virtue, and I wanted that sort of subliminal essence of religion, and that kind of, you connect those colors together with a sort of religious quality to it. So yeah, that's very much my kind of look. I wanted that sort of Byzantine edge to it as well. So I would say, because we've got the gold, we're slightly more blingy than most of the rest of Highguard.
And it's a fun opportunity in terms of costume creation, right? To sort of have a bit more bling and sort of, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Highguard brief is very much about, like, if you are going to have like bling, it's all around sort of like the edges, like sort of like trimmings and on the hems and stuff like that. So it's sort of like you have a very plain kind of cassock, for example, and then you have some bling on the cuffs or something, and that will look really cool. So yeah, it's very much that kind of aspect. Also put an edge of militarism in it. So part of my personal gear now involves wearing a gorget at all times, just to have that, again, military kind of aesthetic in it. And yeah, so our chapter logo, it's sort of it's meant to look like a compass, because Highguard originated from the navigators who sailed across the sea. And it's a compass with the labyrinth in the middle as a sort of sign of saying, we're going to find the way, and we're going to find the right path to the way. So again, it's all this sort of lots of elements drawn from various aspects. That's
cool. That's really cool. And it's probably worth saying,
and
actually...
no skulls. I specifically said no skulls for the chapter because I'm bored of skulls.
So in terms, because it's worth saying, like, those logos, like a Shattered Tower again kind of comes into my mind, but like it's almost like heraldry, right? There is quite spoke of it before, this idea of having this identity that people from the same chapter have, and how that logo is replicated, and as you say, is like branding that kind of feeds through the whole chapter. In terms of how you kind of go around displaying that, are you kind of having that on a tabard or something like that at the moment? Are you thinking about other ways of kind of displaying?
I mean,
the
kind
logo?
of anywhere and everywhere can count. Personally, I quite like going for small little logos. So like something on the shoulder or the upper arm, maybe just one over the heart on the chest.
Nice.
Just little details here and there, maybe a necklace with the logo on it. Like I say, little things is my personal favorite. But again, like, you know, you get people like like Jason's Legacy, who are definitely trying to up the branding game, and they've got it on like their tankards and stuff. You know, they're walking around with their tankards on their belts, and then you've got the Jason's Legacy logo. So again, it very, again, the whole sort of branding thing. It's actually part of the brief in the sense of the whole uniformity thing, you know, being really proud of, like, you choose to join a chapter for a reason, like you don't just sort of fall into it. And it's very much sort of, you've got to make the personal choice.
And you wear it with pride, kind of.
Completely. So yeah, it and what's nice as well is you very quickly, and I think this is quite good for other nations as well, is you can very quickly identify where someone is from, and everyone's got sort of like shortened chapter names. So the Shatter Tower is now referred to as the Tower, and everyone knows who that is.
Right,
You've got the country of the Silver Skulls, which are the Silver Skulls. Felix's What, you know, it's the What. And again, you can, if people come over being like, "Hey, I'm looking for Felix's What," you go, "Look for the cross keys," and that's all you need to say. And you know, people be a bit like, "What do you mean?" And then as soon as they see someone with a massive set of cross keys on them, they're like, "Oh, okay, I see what you mean."
That's really, that's very true actually, because often one of the hardest things in play, and those of you who've been to, I'm sure, any festival can identify with this, is this idea of that you've been given a name and you've been told a nation. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to find the person at any kind of swift time. And actually having those visual cues, I can imagine, must be actually really logistically...
really helpful.
Like, really helpful. It's like often you can stumble into the wrong nation and not you almost entirely be aware. And then when you are in the nation, you're asking people and they're like, what? You know what, I don't entirely know. And then, and then from there, you can kind of go about 5-6 conversations deep before you even get a pointer as to where you're supposed to go.
Yeah,
so
and I again, like, if at least you have a chapter name, like, again, like Felix's Watch, I'm looking for someone from Felix's Watch, and you go into Highguard going, the people will at least be able, if they don't know the person, they'll at least be able to direct you to that particular chapter. So at least you're like in the right place. And yeah, it's good, because then you get other instances where, you know, people be like, "Oh, well, what were they wearing? Oh, well, they were wearing green and black." So, oh, they're probably from the Shatter Tower then.
Yeah. So I'm going to put you in the role of the tourist board, if you like, for Highguard. And just leaning into this a little bit, if I was somebody who was, as an outsider, like from another nation, interested in exploring some of the sights and sounds and experiences of Highguard, are there specific things or places or types of interaction that I should seek out, or things that you think would be interesting elements of play for me to explore?
I would very much take you to the Highguard Chapel as a starting point. So the Highguard Chapel is a little Burgundian tent that we hire from PD, and basically all of Highguard puts some money into a pot to hire it out. Wow. And it's literally a community tent, like, so no one sleeps in it or anything. It's just a Burgundian that's done up like a chapel. So we have an altar, we have these beautiful hangings that hang from the ceiling. I believe they're silk painted. Oh, wow. Which represent all the virtues. I mean, they're amazing. It's done like
I've not seen this. I'm already excited.
It's so good. There's incense there, there's wind chimes, so you get that wonderful like background bells ringing, and there's the Book of the Dead, which is a recent thing that that someone in Highguard created, and it's basically this massive book. It's like a sort of iron-bound book, and it's where the names of the fallen get written. And so during Day of the Dead, this book comes out from its sort of plinth in the chapel, and then the names get read from the book. And you just go in there, and you do get just this. It's, you know, when you sort of walk into a church and you get that sort of weird tingly feeling of just like, this is like, you know, even if you're not religious, you feel this sort of sense of like, you know,
the grandeur of the building and the structure and the ceremony that's taken place.
Completely. Yeah. And you get that in this little Burgundian tent in a field in England. And it's really strange. And it's where people go to contemplate stuff. It's where people go to have serious discussions about virtue. If people are terminal and are bleeding out and there's nothing that can be done to save them, sometimes they will get taken to the chapel to sort of have their last rites given. It's a very wonderful sort of core point of the nation. And I don't think a lot of people outside of Highguard know about it. But if you want to kind of get a sense of Highguard, number one place I would say start off is in the chapel, just as a beginning point.
Yeah, no, that's as I was saying, I completely had no idea that was a thing, and I'm very excited about it. And I mean, yeah, that sounds incredible. In terms of you personally, have you kind of got other like nations that you're interested in sort of exploring more, or do you have like a if the worst should happen, like another kind of character in your back pocket that you kind of, or other nations that you'd be interested in joining in the future, or things like that? I mean, you spoke about the League earlier.
So, you know, I love Highguard so much, and I think I'm really going to miss it as and when I am no longer playing Luke. Think I will probably join the League for a bit, just because, like I say, I'm a costume nerd, so I want to make me some doublets. But I'm pretty certain, or later, I will come back to Highguard. It's just too interesting. Might do. I've got some ideas for Dawn. Got some Urizen ideas, and I really like the Freeborn costume brief. I love all that use of color and everything. That's the only downside of Highguard. We don't get to be as colorful as anyone else. But yeah, I really like their costume brief. So sure. You know, maybe. But yeah. I would never have thought it, but Highguard is where my heart is.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, I had a similar experience with Navarre. Like, when stepping into Empire before knowing anything about it, I was kind of looking around at the different nations, the ones that kind of jumped out at me. I've always kind of been into that kind of Eastern European, sort of Eurasian steppe kind of style stuff, that sort of Turkic influence. So I was always looking at Varushka, and I was like, oh, that would be a nation I'd be interested in playing. And then we played in Navarre, and to be honest with you, it wasn't one of those briefs that really jumped out at me, but the experience of playing in the nation, and like having songs and stories, and having the camaraderie that's come about through there, I almost can't imagine myself somewhere else. I mean, there are certainly places I'd be thinking of going. Again, like similar to you, that the League and the Brass Coast are both sort of things that kind of call to me. Just the colours are so striking, I think.
Yeah, it's all about the colours.
So, I mean, the opportunities for costume design, I think, or kit design, sorry, are really, really interesting. I mean, you as someone who obviously takes in a lot of commissions and so on, are there particular types of things that you've really had a lot of fun making for Empire sort of recently that jump out at you?
I make a lot of Jaime Lannister coats.
Right.
the amount of people who come up to me and like, I want a Jaime Lannister coat, and it's like, okay, yep, another one of these. And I don't mind it. I actually quite enjoy doing like sort of variations on the Jaime Lannister coat, like doing slightly different designs, but at the core it is still a Jaime Lannister coat. I'd love to do more sort of female things. Like, I want to make more dresses. Like, I get a lot of men who commission me, which I do not mind. I love making like all kinds of clothes, but yeah, sometimes you're like, I just want to make a pretty dress. Yeah. I love making doublets. Doublets I really enjoy, but again, I do a lot of Highguard commissions for people, so it's lots of cassocks and coats, and again, it gives me a chance to sort of look into the more Game of Thrones-y side of things and kind of be like, I'm trying to make epaulets a thing in Highguard at the moment.
That would be
sort of
really
shoulder
cool.
pieces.
Yeah, that would be really nice. And it's an opportunity to add a little bit of flair and bling to the nation, right?
Yeah. So I recently
with still
made
keeping that military vibe as well.
Yeah, totally. And it's sort of bringing that kind of military element into the outfit. So I recently made a cloak for someone in Highguard, and it's got dragon scale epaulets on the shoulders.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
part of it is obviously it's like, it's like that armor, it's got that epaulette look, that military look, but also in Highguard, one of the sort of background beliefs we believe in is the idea of the Highguard basilisk. And so I wanted to kind of lean into that, dragon scale, basilisk scale kind of hint. So there's lots of I love being able to put like meaning into clothes, like something is there for a particular reason. It's not just stuck on for the sake of it.
I think that's an interesting. I've recently gone down to see Andy from the Orcs Planet, and he's making me a cloak, and that's a really exciting opportunity. But talking as to a costume designer like yourself is. And this is, I guess, separate from Highguard or anything, but it's an interesting opportunity having someone like you on the podcast. So I hope you don't mind me kind of diving into this.
No, not at all.
As somebody seeking to commission someone to do work, are there any tips that you can give for people seeking to source a commission about the types of ideas and questions and brief they should give you, and what sort of helps you achieve that kind of end result? Are there sort of certain things that you look for and say, oh, this is a really helpful client to deal with?
Yeah. So I will start off by saying every person who does commissions is different, so I can't speak for everyone.
Sure.
But from my experience, I actually say to people, can you make me a Pinterest board of not necessarily like I want this specific garment, but more of like the vibe you're going for, the sort of aesthetic. So I made an outfit a while back for someone who is a Wintermark Thane, and he sent me a load of pictures of King Theoden from Lord of the Rings, and what's his name? One of the dwarves. I've forgotten his name from The Hobbit. But so it was this very kind of like regal with furs and this sort of, this intricate embroidery and so then that gave me the chance to then put together a design sort of based off those elements.
Sure. So like a mood board almost. Yeah,
very much a mood board. And I don't like it when people say like, I specifically want this garment, and they'll send me a picture, but I want it in blue with my group logo on it or something. Sure. When it's very much kind of doing a direct copy, I don't enjoy doing that, because A, it's someone else's work, and B, it doesn't sort of allow for that creativity. Again, things like, the generic stuff of understands that commissioners need to be paid and things are probably going to be more expensive than you expect it to be. That sort of thing. But yeah, I think just like if there's anything you specifically want it to have, bring that up at the beginning. So people saying to me halfway down the line, oh, I want this to have pockets, it's like, oh well, I've already made it now. And it's things like that, just so if you kind of come up with an idea of what you want to begin with, and sort of like those elements make it specific, but the actual design just kind of be like, I want this sort of vibe, this sort of aesthetic going on.
Yeah, and I think having an in-depth conversation from the outset, and having a clean view maybe of not necessarily 100% what you want, because I think that does give elements of, because then you can have a back and forth with the person you're seeking someone's artistic skill, so it's useful, I think, to let the artist sort of help you, because they can also look at your current kit, for example, and say, oh, well, maybe have you considered this? Because I think it would accentuate this other aspect of your kit that you have currently existing or whatever. And, I really like this element of your kit that we have going, so why don't we make something that maybe shows that a little bit and doesn't just like completely cover it up or something, for example. You can start having these kind of evolving conversations. And I think, I mean, obviously everyone's different in how they approach it, but I think there's
yeah.
definitely interesting conversations you can have, and I think being detailed, having that detail front loaded, I think is maybe a good way to go. Would you agree with that?
Oh, completely. You know, I've very much had people. A recent design I finished was not for Empire, I'm afraid, but for a different LARP.
Sure.
They would be. It's Greek gods in the Regency era, which I was like, yeah, I'm down for that.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, and their character is they're playing Aphrodite.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, cool. How do I take Aphrodite? Yeah, how do I take Aphrodite and put it in like the Regency era? So again, there's lots of kind of like, you know, how do you feel about using sort of like nude fabrics, you know, sort of lots of sort of satins and silky stuff to kind of create that sensual kind of vibe. And it's all about kind of figuring out what works for the player. And, you know, they'll be like, oh, what, you know, someone might say, I don't like my arms being on show. Can I have long sleeves, for example? And things like that. And kind of going, yeah, we can do long sleeves. How about this? The outfit I'm working on at the moment, the chap is in the league, and he said that his group colors are black and white and another color, but he was like, I don't know what the other color should be. And I was like, how do you feel about salmon pink?
Right, sure.
And he was like, that sounds mad. I'm into it. Do it. So yeah, and it's that sort of thing of kind of being able to suggest things and kind of having a discussion about what people are okay with and not okay with.
That must be exciting, actually, because you can actually become involved in helping someone define an aspect of their own self-expression, because ultimately that's a degree of what LARP is, and when we're playing, we're expressing ourselves, and you're obviously helping facilitate something that really makes that an achievable end. So that must be
totally.
really exciting to be involved in.
I love it. Like whenever I say to people, you know, what I love about doing costuming, the thing is, for me, I like helping other people feel cool. Like that is what I enjoy most about it, is if someone comes out in an outfit that I've made and they think, yeah, I look awesome, I feel cool, I feel confident, people are looking at how good I look. To me, that's the end goal. I want people to have that feeling and be like, yeah, I'm ready for it. So yeah, that's what it's all about for me.
And leading more broadly on from that, do you have any tips or advice for people to maybe look at getting into sort of costume design and stuff like that, and like how you go around getting into this kind of space that you're in? Is there a good way to kind of start?
She started being a cosplayer. And my gran actually taught me to sew, because before then I could not sew a thing. It was terrible. But I very quickly learned that as much as I love cosplay, I got kind of annoyed at being like, well, I'm doing other people's designs. So the great thing about LARP is, because you're making your own character, you can kind of decide what your character looks like from you know, the top to the bottom. So for me, it was literally start with a really cheap sewing machine, buy some patterns, like the really easy patterns online, about like, oh, okay, well, this is vaguely the sort of shape I want. I did a lot of looking into, again, Pinterest is amazing. I would watch a lot of films and sort of be like, oh, I like that character's outfit, and sort of take notes of it and sort of steal designs from that and sort of chop and change things. And it's very much about just finding stuff you like and using that as inspiration. And again, like I one of the things I would do I would look on sites for fabric, usually fabric far more expensive than I could ever afford. But I would look at it to get ideas of like, oh, okay, like that color is really cool, and if I take that sort of color, obviously a cheaper version of that color, and then make it into this outfit, that would look really cool. And it, to be honest, at the end of the day, it's all just trial and error. So
You are going to make
again,
mistakes, and that's just
you're
part
going
of
to
the
make
process.
mistakes.
Yeah.
And you don't get better if you don't get it wrong, you know.
Yeah. I think that's a very
you know,
true aspect of all of this, and for sure.
Yeah, and I still sometimes sew sleeves in the wrong way around, so you know it happens to people all the time. But yeah, and again, I think also is don't be afraid to step a little bit outside your comfort zone. That's one of the things I have noticed a lot when doing commissions, especially with sort of male presenting people. I don't know if it's because people get nervous or they're not used to sort of being a bit out there or a bit flamboyant. But it will be a kind of case of they'll want something really kind of cool and out there, but there's always the response of, oh, I don't know if I can pull it off. At the end of the day, if you're wearing it, you can pull it off. Like that's all you need to know is like if you are wearing an outfit and you think that garment looks cool, you are pulling it off.
And this is something I've found actually through playing Talus, and I've tried to sort of go into making him, because originally it started off as a joke that, you know, he's a bit of a fancy pants, and actually, to be honest with you, my kit wasn't really, but like I've tried to now move my kit in that direction actually, and become a sort of a fancy Navarre and what that would mean and stuff like that. And actually, like the way it makes me feel, like putting a lot of this stuff on. I mean, it's still not like the most elaborate kit in the world, but I'm proud of it. Oh, thank you. But
I've seen the stash. It's pretty. I really like it.
Like I'm, you know what I mean? It's stuff that like I would have had that conversation with myself and say, I couldn't pull this off, or it's sort of like, you know what I mean? It's something that I wouldn't have thought that I would be wearing. Yeah. But now I am. And now that I go, and LARP's a wonderful place to kind of have these kind of opportunities. And I think, yeah, as you say, especially for people who are male presenting, it can be almost, you can be kind of conditioned to think that these kind of opportunities maybe aren't for you. But it's like, it's actually like, I feel a bit empowered, like wearing it, right? Like I feel like there's something, like it's actually quite uplifting. I mean, obviously there's the fact that I've made a lot of it myself, which is one element. But I think it's also just the fact that it's bright colours and there's a bit of flash and flare to it, and the fact that this is me wearing this, right? Like there is something about that, and I think I would encourage people, not necessarily saying that you have to go like super blingy, but like to explore your imagination of possibility about what your kit could be, rather than hold yourself back into what you think are the limits of where you should be, you know? I mean, like, there's so many, within the briefs, there's so many opportunities to sort of push the envelope a little bit and really define your character, right? Like, you don't have to be just someone, right? You can be you. And I think that's the most, you know, that's that sort of idea of, like, becoming your character and desiring to sort of achieve a look that you feel sort of sells who your character is, I think is a noble pursuit. And I think working with people like yourself and talking with other people, it's, you know, it's certainly like enlightening and eye-opening into the possibilities of what kit can be and where you can potentially take it. And the way it can make you feel, I think, is an important aspect of all of that as well. Yeah,
completely. And again, it's like the amount of times I see people who watch a film and they're like, oh my God, I love what this character is wearing. I wish I could look that cool. It's like, you can. Yeah. Like, you know, there is nothing stopping you from looking that cool. Like, you just need the outfit to do it, and that's completely okay. And you know, again, in just this is from my personal experience, you know, I notice a lot of again, traditionally mask presenting people, you know, they'll spend loads of time making themselves look really cool in all their armor. You know, they look awesome. They decorate their armor, looks awesome. And then when they're, you know, going back to Empire, you know, they're wandering around Anvil and their clothes are just kind of a bit like, and again, this isn't kick shaming, but it's like, in comparison to the armor, it's not as sort of like vibrant and out there. And it's like, there's nothing stopping you from looking just as cool as you do in your armor, but in your soft kit, you know? And I just think, yeah, like, there is so much out there. There are so many sellers out there. There's so many commissioners out there. You know, if you're not confident at starting at doing your own kit, that's totally fine. People will happily make you kit. And even if it's just a case of you've got I don't know, a Mithlon coat, just sewing some nice trim that you found around the edge can be the start of it. Like, you don't have to start, you know, completely flamboyantly out there. You can start small and kind of build. And again, the nice thing is when you're wearing like a cool looking outfit or just something that's like a little bit more fancy, people will go up to you and be like, wow, I really like that. Where'd you get that from? And then you sort of get this nice tingly feeling of like, oh, well, yeah, thank you. And then it's like, well, now I want like something to match this, because then I do. And that's what's so nice about it. I mean, I love going up to people in kit that I see and go, oh, that's really nice. And I'll go up to them and be like, yeah, OC, just want to say I love your kit. You know, most of the time I'll try and do it in the out of character area, but sometimes you're like, I will never find this person again, so I need to tell them now.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways to like take whatever that vibe of kit. Like if that vibe is, say, you want to look scruffy, right? There's a way of actually doing a scruffy look, and like I've seen this a whole bunch. Or to do like a grungy look, or to do like any of those kind of looks. It doesn't have to be blingy. There's ways of doing these other types of looks that are also really dramatic and really striking and really sell this idea of character and story and the opportunities. And also, as you as a player play your character, it's not like when you turn up, you know, you don't necessarily know who you'll grow into or the experiences you'll have along the way. But those experiences, I mean, maybe, for example, you'll get little bits of trinkets along the way. Someone will give you something, or an event will occur and you'll want to sort of represent that in some way. And then there's each of these opportunities you can look at as a way of maybe thinking, how does this maybe affect my look, right? And how does this affect how I present myself? And that can be presenting yourself, obviously, in speaking and in physical performance, but also it's an opportunity to consider how you present yourself in terms of your kit and your outward appearance. And I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities that LARP gives us to sort of allow ourselves to indulge in the idea of a personal narrative that we can project a little bit and not feel, as we sometimes I think do maybe in the real world, we feel a bit more reserved, a bit more and a bit more conformity as to how we should look and how we should present ourselves. LARP gives us that opportunity, I think, to really kind of like push away from that a little bit and explore who we'd like to kind of like express a little bit as this character, you know. So I think it's definitely something worth considering if you're there and you're on the fence and you're thinking about where to go with your kit. And as you say, there's people like yourself, like, and there's so many talented people out there you can ask for tips and pointers on. I mean,
I'm always happy to talk to people about, even if they're just like, can I have some advice on my kit? I will happily natter about kit anytime.
and I think actually, obviously I can't speak for all LARPs, but I know Empire has a bunch of, we do in Navarre, we've got our national group, and I'm sure that well, I know there's one for Highguard as well. In fact, I know there's one for all the different nations. You can go on there and you can sort of ask for opinions on your kit. You can ask for advice about maybe different things that you're considering and about where to go. You know, would certain colors work? Would certain designs work? How could you incorporate this kind of feel and stuff like that? And not like people, in my experience, broadly to the vast degree, are there to be helpful and to uplift you and support you, and that, you know, definitely use the community to your advantage, because there's some wonderful and incredibly talented people out there who can help you achieve what you're trying to get to.
Yeah, and also, like, don't feel that once you have your character's outfit, that's it. That's kind of the end of things. Like, you can add bits, you can take bits away, you know. When something dramatic happens to your character, you know, maybe do something completely different. For me, for example, when so Luke went through literally an in-game year of deciding whether or not he was going to leave his chapter. And so I was like, right, he's going to go on pilgrimage to decide if he's going to, you know, leave or stay or join someone else, whatever. And so I specifically made like a pilgrim's robe. It's literally made out of dust sheets. It is the cheapest thing ever. Literally rectangles sewn together. Look, bing bang bong, it's a robe. but yeah, the response I got from people when I stepped out of my tent, suddenly wearing this white robe, and it looked, it was coarse and it looked sort of like a bit rough, and I'd been walking in it and stuff, and everyone was sort of like, what are you wearing?
Yeah.
And it instantly gave me the opportunity to say, well, I'm going on pilgrimage. And you can use clothing as an opportunity for roleplay, and that's one of the things I think is really cool. One of the bits of bling I added to Solomon from the Shattered Towers coat was the basilisk, because he wanted to have like a massive symbolism of vigilance. Now the coat was already made, like the basilisk was added later, but again, it was that sort of significant, I want to make a statement.
Sure.
And again, that created loads of roleplay out of it. So again, don't just feel like you're sort of constrained to your outfit as is. You can, like, you might be like, this is perfect, I never want to touch it again. Like, something might happen, and then
you'll be surprised.
Don't be afraid. Don't be
surprised.
afraid to play with it.
Like, the things that can occur to you to your character can have sometimes a dramatic. I mean, and of course, this is partly, potentially why we play LARP, right? To go through some shifts in our arc, right, our character arc, and for things to happen. And when those things happen, they may very well speak to you in a way that makes you consider about how you want to represent your character's look. And also, I think another thing is there's often the idea of actually making things is actually quite good fun, and if you've got a taste for it, like the act, like I've, especially during this long dark period, one thing I've really found is actually just sitting down and crafting, and it can be whatever, right? I mean, it's not all LARP stuff, but just sitting down and being a little bit creative or whatever can actually be its own joy. But also the idea that you can then make stuff for other people, and you can be like, here's a little trinket, and this is like, maybe it's something that you give someone else, and there's a real joy, I think, in like being able to sort of say, to sort of pass on a little bit of kit and just as a gift or whatever. I'm not saying that everyone has to do this by any means, but I think there's certainly, like, there's lots of opportunities for you to express yourself and to bring those expressions into the game, and to have some kind of as visual representations, and I think it's definitely an exciting draw, and the whole kit creation.
and I actually think like Empire is really good for being able to like lean into that sort of crafting side of things. So I've done both big and small crafts, not related to costuming. So I basically went a bit mad for a couple of months, and after an event where I think it was 12 members of the Shattered Tower died, which really affected my character in character, but also it was really sad because these were all really established characters.
Of course.
12 of them died, and so it was all a bit like, oh, really sad, feel sorry for the players. So I made a massive, tabletop-sized mosaic of these characters fighting, in where was it? I think it was in Spiral, and I got to present it. I showed them out of character, but then I got to present it in character, and it was so nice because it meant so much to the players that their characters were being remembered in such a way, but also it's now like a piece of kit that is used for set dressing that the Shattered Tower now have in their chapter tent at all times to sort of use as a thing to roleplay with. And like I say, that was me going a bit mad and doing something huge and massive. On a smaller scale, I bought a little bell, like an old antique bell off eBay, attached it to some leather thonging, and wrote on linen a quote about sort of like remembering what someone has taught you. And I gave it to a character and was like, whose mentor had died, and it really broke them up that their mentor had died. And I was like, look, I know bells don't mean anything in your nation, but in my nation, if you hear them ring, you can sort of hear the voice of those who have passed, and I want you to have this to remember your mentor. And what's really nice is I visited, it was my friend Mim, I visited her, and she still has the bell sitting on her mantelpiece. And
That's
she's
really
just
cool.
like, and she said to me, that is so significant, that little thing, both in character and out of character. I can do so much with it in character, but also, it helped me remember just how much of an emotional impact, that character had on me out of character. And I think that's what's so nice about it is it's not, when you give someone something you've crafted, it's not just you giving something in character. It's, people are happy out of character that they've received something, and it can mean a lot to them. So yeah, and again, it's like you don't have to do anything huge. You can literally buy a bell off eBay and tie a bit of thonging to it, and that will still be meaningful. And I just think that's so lovely,
I think sometimes we can tell ourselves that, and we can be conditioned to think that creativity is something that we can't do. And some people, they get told from, they don't maybe get those positive feedbacks, maybe that they were good at a different type of skills, and they were told, okay, you can do maths and you can do this, but art, it's not for you. And then they get through this part in life where they sort of tell themselves, and they tell other people, and you'll hear it a lot, like, I'm not a creative person, and it's like the innate, I feel like everyone has a degree of creativity within them, and it's just waiting to be expressed. And obviously it's, just consider giving it a go, and there's a great joy that can come from it, and it doesn't have to be perfect or the best thing. And I think, like, even this podcast was one of those things where me and Dave just decided we'd start doing this, right? And it's just like, it's by no means perfect, and it's got me in it for starters, but the point is that, like, just doing something and completing it and taking it to production is its own joy. And I think those of you who have really taken that to the next level with kit creation as well, it is phenomenal, the aesthetics that you can see throughout Empire. So I can only say thank you to helping.
Well, I mean, it's to me, it's like the community, I again, it comes back to, I want people to feel cool. And I think, when you show up in Anvil, with someone who has never been for the first time, and they just have that sort of deer in the headlights look of just, oh my God, because I think, again, with LARP, people always sort of think it's going to be, lightning bolt, or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And I think, the moment they see it and they're like, oh my God, this is like a living, breathing world. And, look how cool that guy looks, and oh my God, that person looks like they've just walked off a film set, or oh my God, look at this amazing thing someone's done. All of that kind of combines together and just makes the whole experience that much better for everyone. And yeah, I think being able to share in that is just wonderful. And yeah, everyone should have a go at making something or crafting something. Even if you think it's rubbish, you won't get better if you don't try,
So I've kind of strayed us a little bit from Highguard. So
yeah.
but also we've I'm aware that we've been nattering for quite a while. Normally how we end these things is me and Dave, we have our Strength of the Empire, Strength of Navarre thing to say farewell. But we've kind of been interested with doing these national things. Is there sort of a national sort of sign off or national words that you kind of say to each other before?
So I would say the Empire is our destiny.
There you go. The Empire is our destiny. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, this has been great. Thank you.
Ah! Sorry about that.
Bloody hell, it's the squatters. Guards! Intruders!
We're here to help. That mob outside is here for the both of you.